thank you so much for worshiping with us this morning. Please take your seats.
Well, good morning. It's so good to see you here today, and I want to speak to you if you're watching online. This is our first attempt at going live, so some of you may be watching right now live, and we're glad that you could join us. Some of you online aren't watching live. You're watching at a later time, but thanks for connecting with us in that way. Now, today we're beginning a new series entitled Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And here's an artist's conception of what these young men look like when we first meet them. We find their story in the book of Daniel. Now, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are the three young men to your left. That's their friend Daniel over there to the right. When we first meet them, their names are not Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Their names are Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So what happened? Why the name change? Why are we getting confused here with two different sets of names? Well, let me explain. This map will show you where Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah grew up. They were born and grew up in the city of Jerusalem in the land of Israel. But one day, the mightiest empire in the world, the king of that empire, Babylon, sent his armies to Jerusalem, conquered the city, conquered the nation of Israel, and took captive back to Babylon a number of Jews, including those four young men. When they got there, they were given new names. You see, the names that they had in Jerusalem were the names that went along with the one true God, the God that you and I know and love. Their names were rooted in the names of God, the true God. When they got to Babylon, the Babylonians said, you can't have those Hebrew names. You're going to have Babylonian names that represent Babylonian gods. And here are the names that they were given: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now you see the Ak, or the Ak, that is short for Aku, one of the Babylonian gods. At the end of Meshach, again you see Ak for Aku. Abednego, Nego, is part of the name for Nebo, one of the other major Babylonian gods. So that's why they got these names, was to try to get them conformed to the ways of the Babylonians, the thinking, and even the religion of the Babylonians. Didn't work, because as you see in this next picture, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and their good friend Daniel always stayed in touch with the one true God. They stayed devoted in their prayer and their worship of the one true God. No matter what names the Babylonians gave to them, they believed in and loved the one true God that you and I know and love. Now, because of that, God blessed them with great wisdom and understanding. And their wisdom and understanding even impressed the king of Babylon, whose name was Nebuchadnezzar. Here's Nebuchadnezzar meeting with the four young men. He's so impressed with them. He's so moved by things that they say, things that they know, things that they've done, that he gives them great promotion in the kingdom of Babylon. In fact, we learn at the end of Daniel chapter 2 that the king set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. He gave them some of the highest positions in the kingdom of Babylon under his rule. That's not all. we also learn at the end of chapter 2 this amazing statement, these two amazing statements, where King Nebuchadnezzar says this about their God. He said, "Truly, your God is the God of gods." That's amazing. He was so impressed by the work of God in the lives of these young men that he said, "I've come to see that your God, the God of Israel, is the true God. He's a greater God than our gods, Abu and Aku and Nebo, those gods. He's a greater God than they are. And not only that, but here's what he says next. Your God is the Lord of kings. I'm a king. I'm the king of the greatest empire in the world. But I've come to learn that your God is Lord over me." Amazing how God used these young men to influence the king. But time goes by and things change. And now we're going to move forward. As we move into Daniel chapter 3, we move forward about 10, maybe 20 years. We don't know exactly how long it is, but by the time we pick it up in chapter 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are grown young men. And here's what happens as we read next. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 90 feet, and its width was 9 feet. And here's an artist's conception of that statue. If you want me to give you a feel for how tall 90 feet is, I drove downtown this week to check this out. Hotel Marshall is about 9 stories tall. It's now the ETBU nursing school. But if you want to picture how tall 90 feet is, picture the Hotel Marshall. That's about how high this statue was. So that's pretty tall. The tallest skyscraper in Marshall. That's how tall the statue was. And it was all gold. Pretty impressive. Well, where did this come from? Why did the king do this? Well, we don't have to guess because we know from chapter 2 that Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. And God gave him this dream. And in the dream, Nebuchadnezzar saw this statue that I want to show you next. And the statue had a head of gold, chest of silver, belly of bronze, and legs of iron. And King Nebuchadnezzar didn't know what it meant. God told Daniel not only what it meant, but first he told Daniel the dream. And Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar what this statue represented. Nebuchadnezzar, this statue represents kingdoms. The head of gold is you, Nebuchadnezzar, and your kingdom of Babylon. And after you will come other great kingdoms. And we know from later history that silver represents the kingdom of Medo-Persia, followed by the kingdom of Greece, followed by the kingdom of Rome. Well, Nebuchadnezzar had been thinking about this for 10 or 20 years. And he thought, okay, that's flattering that the one true God would recognize me as the head of gold and the kingdom of Babylon as the head of gold, but I have a better idea. And his better idea was expressed in the statue that we saw earlier. Here it is again. Let's make it all gold. Let's make it all represent Babylon. Let's make it all represent me. Let's not talk about future kingdoms. Let's talk about the enduring kingdom of Babylon and my legacy to follow. I want to proclaim that mine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. And so he built this statue, this image of himself representing himself and his kingdom. So what did he do with it? Did he just build it and let it stand there? Far from that. Here's what he did with it as we keep reading. King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather together the princes, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces. Now that had to be hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, the most important people in the kingdom and surrounding provinces of the kingdom of Babylon. And he summoned them to do what? Well, we read next, summoned them to come to the dedication of the image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the princes, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered together for the dedication, and they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Now that had to be quite an event, quite a sight. You can just see all these important people dressed in their robes and their uniforms, and they're being interviewed on Good Morning Babylon, and they're taking selfies in front of the statue, and hopefully maybe they could get a picture taken even with King Nebuchadnezzar. It was an amazing gathering of all these highest officials of the whole kingdom. Then it was time for an announcement. And we read about the announcement next, where a herald cried aloud, "To you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, and harp in symphony with all kinds of music, that you shall fall down and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into a furnace of blazing fire." And all the people said, "Oh, that's pretty clear. We bow down or we die. We bow down and worship the image, which is the same as worshiping the king, or we get thrown into the fiery furnace." Pretty clear. So here's what happens. So at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, flute, and harp in symphony with all kinds of music, all the people, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they spoke and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever." And here's an artist's conception of what happened on that day. Notice the image, 90 feet tall, all the people down here bowing before the image and giving glory to King Nebuchadnezzar, saying, "King, live forever." But if you're looking closely at the picture, you notice that something is going on here, because there's three men not bowing before the king. Who could they be? Who are these three men? And didn't they get the memo that if you don't bow down, you're going to get thrown into the fiery, blazing, the furnace of blazing fire? Who are they? Well, we don't have to guess, because we're told as we keep reading that at that time certain men came forward and accused the Jews. And they said to the king, "There are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, do not serve your gods or worship the gold image which you have set up." So going back to the picture, I want to make sure we know who these are. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, refusing to worship the gods of the king or to bow down and worship the king himself. So how do you think King Nebuchadnezzar feels about that? I'll bet you can guess, but we're told that Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, don't miss those words, because even in our language, those are pretty powerful words. Wouldn't you agree? Rage, fury. Here's what he does. He gave the command to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so they brought these men before the king. Here's a picture of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego standing before King Nebuchadnezzar. And notice he's got his finger pointing right at him, because he's raging. He's furious as he reaches out to them with his words and we read that King Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image which I have set up?" And he doesn't even wait for an answer, because he knows the answer, and so do they, that it is true that they don't worship his gods or bow before his image. He raises the question, then he immediately speaks and says, "Now, if you are ready." Now, I want to pause there, because what he's saying is, if you're ready, I'm going to give you another chance. I like you guys. I don't want to kill you. I'm going to give you a second chance. So if you are ready, at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, and harp in symphony with all kinds of music, and you fall down and worship the image which I have made, I have a word for you. If you will fall down and worship the image which I have made, I have one word for you, and the word is good. Good. That'll be good for you. That'll be good for me. We'll get along. I won't have to throw you in the fire. You'll get to live. It'll be good. So just do it. But, as he goes on to say, if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into a furnace of blazing fire. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hand? So here are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, having just heard that from the king. And I wonder if they huddled up. I wonder if they said, "Excuse us, King, could we just have a little meeting right now?" And they got together in a little huddle and said to each other, "Oh man, we're in trouble. This is bad. We're going to die. We got to figure out what to do here. Everybody else is doing it. And when in Babylon, do what the Babylonians do, right? And besides that, what happens in Babylon stays in Babylon, right? And besides that, the king's been good to us. He's done so much good and given us such great privileges in serving him in his kingdom. That's the least we can do, is just go along with this just for a moment. And besides that, what good are we dead? I mean, how are we going to serve God dead? It's much better to serve alive in the king's palace than it is to be ashes in the king's furnace. So maybe we just ought to do it just this one time." Now, they didn't have a huddle. There was no discussion. They didn't need to come up with a plan. They knew exactly what to say to the king immediately without even thinking twice about it. And they do. Here's how they respond to the king. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, if you do that to us, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king." Let's stop right there, because they meant every word of this. If you try to throw us in the fire, we're not worried about it. We have a God. Our God is able to deliver us. And they were so confident that they said, "Our God will deliver us." That's not all he said, because there's something else that they say immediately after this that is one of the most profound, classic, important, powerful statements. One line that is one of the greatest statements that you'll find in all the Bible, when they say this: "But even if he does not." I love it, what they say. We know he can deliver us. We know he's able. We know that he can. We believe that he will. But even if he does not, and he might not, because he might know something we don't know. He might have a plan that we don't understand. So even if he does not, here's what we want to say to you, O king. Let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. I want us to picture them as we look at our picture next, standing before the king, saying, we know he can deliver us, but even if he does not, we will still not worship your gods or bow before your image. What were they thinking? What was it that would motivate them to make a decision such as this, to say, even if he kills us, we're not going to give in. We're going to stand even if we die for our decision. What was it that motivated them? We don't have to guess. We're told in the New Testament. The writer of Hebrews certainly had Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in mind as some of those that he refers to when he says this in the famous faith chapter in Hebrews 11, these words. Not accepting their release in order that they might obtain a better resurrection. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't accept their release from the king's edict because they had their minds, their hearts set on a better resurrection. What's that mean, a better resurrection? Let me explain. Everyone that believes in Jesus for everlasting life is going to be resurrected on a future day in a glorified body in which that person will live forever. God promises everlasting life as a free gift to the one who simply believes in Jesus for that gift. A promise of everlasting life that begins the moment you believe, and it lasts forever. And it includes a promise of physical bodily resurrection on a future day. But some will experience a better resurrection than others. All those who have everlasting life will experience resurrection. Some a better resurrection. What's that mean? It means that some will have greater reward in a future kingdom. Every believer who has everlasting life will be in the kingdom. But some will have greater reward. They'll be closer to Christ. They will have greater privileges of serving Christ in the future kingdom. All that's involved in that term, better resurrection. So when we go back to the picture of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we know what's turning in their minds. God can deliver us. We believe that he will. But even if he does not, we're not going to give in to the king. And if it means our death, that only means that God will be pleased with us in a way that we will experience an even better resurrection on a future day. This is a great story. I mean, this is one of the greatest stories that you'll find in all of Scripture. And we're right in the middle of it. I mean, we're just in the middle of it right now. And all of us should want to know, well, what happens next? Do you want to know what happens next? I'll tell you next week. Next week we'll find out what happens next. It's exciting what happens next, but it's exciting what we've learned today. And I think it's important to stop right here and think about the lessons that we have learned from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego here at the midpoint of the story. And the lesson is so well captured and stated by Mercy Me, a singing group called Mercy Me, in their song entitled Even If. And here's the chorus to the song. I know you're able, and I know you can save from the fire with your mighty hand. But even if you don't, my hope is you alone. Now, you can look at that and see where they got the inspiration for that song. They got it from the story we just looked at. They got it from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego because they're repeating the circumstance and almost the very words that Well, the very words that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said to the king. It's easy to see where they got the inspiration for the song. And I think it's easy to see how this applies to you and me. Easy to see. Because every one of us in this room is going through or facing a fire in your life. Peter in the New Testament talks about fiery trials. He describes the trials that we face in life as fiery trials. And every one of you in this room or watching online, you're going through a trial. Some of you are going through more than one trial right now. And it can be very difficult and troubling. And more than anything else, we need what we've learned from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego here today. And I want to ask you, as you think about the trial that you're going through right now, can you say these words to God? Is this your prayer? Lord, I know that you're able, and I know that you can save from this fiery trial in my life with your mighty hand. But even if you don't, my hope is you alone. What are the trials that you're going through right now? Maybe your trial is loneliness. You're lonely. And it's a real trial. It's a real struggle. Can you say that to God? That, Lord, I know you're able, and I know that you can. Save me from this loneliness and bring a friend or a companion or even a spouse. But even if you don't, my hope is you alone. You may be married, and your trial right now is your marriage. Your marriage is struggling. Can you say to God, even in the midst of your struggle, Lord, I know you're able, and I know you can work a miracle in my marriage and save me from the heartache that I'm experiencing. But even if you don't, my hope is you and you alone. Maybe your struggle is financial or it's work related. Can you say to God in the midst of that struggle, Lord, I know you're able and I know you can. Save me from this financial struggle, this work problem with your mighty hand. But even if you don't, my hope is you alone. For some of you, it might be a physical problem, either for you or someone that you love. I mean, either you've got physical problems or you've got a loved one, somebody that you love that you're really concerned about. Can you say this to God that, Lord, I know you're able. I know you can save from this illness or this possible death with your mighty hand? But even if you don't, my hope is you alone. Now, there's one struggle, there's one trial that we all have in common this morning, and that's COVID-19. I'm sick of it, and you are too. It has caused so much trouble, whether you get the virus or not. It's caused economic struggle. It's caused all kinds of trouble and stress and difficulty in the life of our city, our nation, and our world. And it's a trial. It's a fiery trial that we're in with COVID-19. Can you say to God what Shadrach and Meshach said that day? Lord, I know you're able. I know you can. Save us from COVID-19. You could put a stop to this overnight. You could stop the spread and you could bring a cure overnight by your mighty hand. But even if you don't, my hope is you and you alone. I'll give you one more. The upcoming presidential election. There's a lot of tension going on right now, and we're 4 months away. And some of you are fearful about the future of our nation. because you have a strong opinion of who ought to be president for the next 4 years and who ought not to be president for the next 4 years. And it's a trial for you to think about the candidate that you want not getting elected and the other one getting elected. So I want to ask, when you think about that trial, can you say what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said? Lord, I know you're able, and I know you can. Save us from the other candidate and put the one I want in by your mighty hand. But even if you don't, my hope is you alone. What a great lesson we've learned from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Take it to heart for whatever your trial might be today or in the future. Our closing prayer this day will be a song. The very song that I referred to is reflected by this chorus. As Ladarius leads it, this will be our closing prayer. And I look forward to seeing you again next week. Let's all stand as we sing.
They say sometimes you win some, sometimes you lose some. But right now I'm losing bad. I stood on this stage night after night, reminding the broken it'll be alright. But right now, oh, right now I just can't. It's easy to sing when there's nothing to bring me down. But what will I say when I'm held to the flames like I am right now? I know you're able and I know you can. Safe through the fire with your mighty hand. But even if you don't, my hope is you alone. They say it only takes a little faith to move a mountain. Good thing, a little faith is all I have right now. God, when you choose to leave mountains unmovable, oh, give me the strength to be able to sing. It is well with my soul. I know you're able and I know you can. Safe through the fire with your mighty hand. But even if you don't, my hope is you alone. I know the sorrow and I know the hurt. You'll all go away if you just say the word. But even if you don't, my hope is you alone. You've been faithful, you've been good all my days. Jesus, I will cling to you, come what may. I know you're able, and I know you can. I know you're able, and I know you can. Safe through the fire with your mighty hand. But even if you don't, my hope is you alone. I know the sorrow, and I know the hurt would all go away if you just say the word. soul. It is well with my soul. Thank you so much. Have a blessed week.